So let me just say this right from the get-go. The Acolyte Episode 3 is an abomination to the Star Wars franchise. It is the worst, I say the worst, presentation that we have seen under Disney's wing. It focuses on the message / the agenda all out in your face, above proper storytelling, above proper character development and common sense, and even shifts away from what Star Wars is all about. Now, not to mention we have bad acting, terrible acting in this episode, and even a semi-musical segment. I talked about this on my Twitter / X, if you guys want to go ahead and check it out. But interestingly enough, we have people out there like Leslye Headland, the showrunner of this series that supports all this garbage, and Kathleen Kennedy, and many more defending the series like there's no tomorrow. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new, and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. So, the Acolyte Episode 3, to put things short, it focuses on the witches of Brendok, I believe the world was called, and it really focuses on, like I said earlier, the LGBTQ message, the agenda, to focus on that community above everything else. Even to the point where members of the LGBTQ community are calling out the Acolyte Episode 3. They are calling out Leslye Headland. Even they are not happy with this episode, and that is very revealing. That just goes to show you exactly what the Acolyte is all about when it comes to Disney shenanigans. Let's get into this though, however. Now, of course, Leslye Headland is going to defend the series at all costs. She will never admit failure. She will never admit that what she's doing is out of place because, well, let's just face it, the series is not done yet, and they will never admit any kind of failure. That's just proper Disney in terms of their view of things. Now, with the Acolyte Episode 3 now officially out on Disney+, already those like Leslye Headland and Kathleen Kennedy have been heading into desperate damage control to save the series. With Episode 3 already creating more backlash than The Last Jedi did, recently Leslye delivered the following to everyone regarding Episode 3. As one who always wanted to change Star Wars, my biggest fantasy was how could I combine elements of Kill Bill, The Matrix, and even Frozen with Star Wars. And with our latest episode, my goal was how could we focus on the two sisters and a musical and how that relates to the Frozen films by Disney. So guys, let me just stop here quick before I move on. Yes, they basically go into a semi-musical segment. I would say, you know, about a little toward halfway, maybe even more than halfway through the episode. Correct me if I'm wrong. But there is a semi-musical in here. If you listen carefully, there's a point where it's not even, you know, a chant coming from the characters. It turns into an actual overdubbed song. So she goes on to deliver the following. It's also one of my finest episodes that properly represents the LGBTQ representation and the difficult life that they go through out in the real world. That stigma, you know? I really wanted to project that in Episode 3, and of course, you are always going to have naysayers that don't truly understand Star Wars and will call your vision and agenda which is flat out delusional and just a part of their narrative to make others believe their view of Star Wars. But what I really wanted to do with Episode 3 was how we could focus on the sisters and the mothers and their relationships and lives and how they are oppressed of this unknown world. This was an episode that I took much inspiration from Rian Johnson to really do something bold and different for Star Wars. I think I can now claim that I was the first to put an actual musical in Star Wars. I really wanted to focus on that with the Witches of Brendok. I absolutely love Jodie Turner-Smith. I mean, she's a great singer, as it turns out. When we were directing her on how to do this small musical segment, we knew going into this episode that we were going to be dealing with toxic males and their views of the sisters and the mothers, and I think that was the point of this episode. It really represents the LGBTQ community and their position in this world. The stigma that I think needs to be controlled by confidence. This is just the beginning of how we represent that community. I also found it was important for us to find a way to insert pronouns in this series, and how we are about to make that work in Episode 4. I mean, it truly is inspiring to say the least. To all the naysayers about this series, I think they just don't understand that Star Wars isn't really about George's vision anymore. We really wanted to focus on the matriarchy in the third one, and how we will continue to do that in various ways. So before I continue, guys, again, Leslye Headland is going all out lunatic here with the Acolyte episode 3 with her view of LGBTQ representation. So obviously she's trying to make it like the witches are obviously the ones that represent that community. That was always the plan. She basically is saying that she wanted to make them be viewed as oppressed on this witch-like world. I believe it's called, like she said, Brendok. Now, interestingly enough, we know that there's a lot of things going on here. The fact that they went all out with their DEI agenda, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and even doubled down on bad writing, terrible acting, even engaging in a musical in Star Wars is just awful. Alright, now like I pointed out earlier, the musical segment in this actual episode, it's a semi-musical segment, it's not long, but there is a point, you gotta listen very carefully, there is a point where the chants coming from the witches, it actually turns into a real overdubbed song. And that's to the point where it's like leaving you shaking your head, what in the world are we watching now? Where has Star Wars gone? You know, where are we at right now? That's, of course, the situation. We have hit, I think, lower than rock bottom. We freaking hit bedrock when it comes to the Acolyte episode 3. But moving on, she goes on to continue. But the patriarchy has always been relevant in Star Wars. Focusing on the life of the witches was definitely how I view the world in some ways, especially that I'm proudly part of the LGBTQ community. I really wanted to show fans that bad perception of the Jedi and how we could create a new way to present the Jedi as more like the villains in this episode. This show is all about twisting the meaning of good and bad, and it truly was an inspiring piece to go through. I think any who have a problem with this episode just all, of course, are falling into being racists and or those that fall into bigotry. It's just something that you can't change with some people. So again, basically what Leslye Headland is trying to do in this episode, or I don't know if you guys caught on to it, but any, normal person caught on to this within 2 seconds, like the snap of a finger there. You have Mother Coral, you have Mother Anastasia. Mother Anastasia created the two children. Mother Coral carried them. Alright, we saw that sequence where there's a hand stroke across the face between the two characters, and they're talking about how it was so troublesome raising these kids, and how they are kids, and that they're expected to act in that way. They really went all out with this episode, to the point where it's not just about, let me repeat, it's not just about the representation and the overall agenda. Above and, in isolation from all of that, it's just terrible writing, a terrible presentation, awful execution, and the fact that you throw a musical, even if it's for like 30, 40 seconds, into Star Wars is enough to make it worse than The Last Jedi. Alright, I'll say it here right now, that's exactly where the Acolyte episode 3 stands. It is by far the worst presentation in Star Wars history under Disney's wing, under everything that Kathleen Kennedy has done at Lucasfilm. I don't think that we can get any worse than this. Actually, you know what? I wouldn't be too shocked if we could get worse than this. But overall, I would love to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.